You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lonero, on Twitter at Justin Lonero, along with my co-host, as always, Bob Harris, on Twitter at Football Diehard, and our executive producers on the line tonight, Mr. Kyle Dvorchak, on Twitter at FF Kyle the Kid. It is week 10. This show is brought to you by DraftKings. Use promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Sign up. DraftKings will hook you up with a free ticket with your first-time $5 deposit. Mr. Harris, week 10, what is going on in Albuquerque, New Mexico this evening?
The usual kind of Albuquerque things, getting crisp and cool and joyous here as we head into the winter time and the NFL season heads into the winter time. I guess, as we're hitting week 10, I'm in 30-some leagues, and some of them are horrible and some of them are faring okay. And so, a little more interest in the DFS as always. Always interested. But, there comes a point where, that's what DFS does. It takes care of the season-long dilemmas, where you have teams that are out of the run, and not that you quit grinding or you give anyone an easy pass, but man, it's nice to have something to look forward to every Sunday, and my GPP lineups are like my lottery tickets to watch the game, and I love that. So we'll get into that here as we go through the show. A couple things, newsy items, kind of a slow news week in general, but the big story, I guess, is AJ Green has avoided foot surgery, but will miss an extended period, maybe a couple weeks. That's what they're telling us. When they say a couple weeks, I often think longer. So I'm curious, Justin, does anyone really benefit from this? Or, look, I know there's going to be targets to go around. My initial feeling is nobody makes out. With AJ Green gone, this is just not as good of an offense probably, right?
Yeah, I talk about nonverbal communication all the time, and Dalton has that certainly with AJ Green. And look, it's nice to see what Tyler Boyd is doing. We've been waiting for this, somebody outside of AJ Green to make a name for themselves in Cincinnati. He's got 49 receptions, 5 touchdowns. So it's a good thing. But yeah, I think the hope is that Joe Mixon in the ground game will become fluid in a week-to-week thing in Cincinnati. But look, if you remove AJ Green from your offense, it would be similar to removing Julio Jones from the Atlanta Falcons. He's that integral of a piece. So it's going to be nice. I think Tyler Boyd will continue to get close to 10 targets each week, but it's certainly something to keep an eye. If they fall on their face, it'll show the significance of what AJ Green means to this Bengals team.
Right. Boyd has obviously benefited, and we see that a lot this, more so as we get in. We've seen it the last few years with Larry Fitzgerald, working out of the slot as a big receiver really benefits him. And we're seeing it this year with Adam Thielen, and we saw what can happen when the other guy, the Stephon Diggs, is out, forces Thielen to play more outside, put him in direct exposure to Darius Slay more. Wasn't a good game for him, his first non-100-yard game in, 8 games. So at 22 yards, still got the touchdown. But, my concern would be Boyd, moving to the outside. Is there anyone else there, Kyle, that you feel, look, John Ross is not been consistent, but is there anyone else there in that receiving core that you would count on?
Count on certainly not. I think I'm in the general agreement that, it's Tyler Boyd you like, and you've been able to count on him, so there's not a change there in terms of the dependability, and I think maybe it's a slight net benefit for him, but count on? No, of course. John Ross has got 16 targets on the year, on and off injury. Last year didn't even get the chance to play due to injury, and then just wasn't good enough to make the field, I guess. So am I interested in picking up John Ross for the back of the roster stash? Is he worth plugging into the flex when bye weeks hit hard or injuries do? Sure, but count on no. Don't blow the entire fab budget.
Yeah, last week was Buymageddon 1. Next week, Buymageddon 2. There will be 6 teams with the off week. We've got 4 this week, and then we have 2 in week 12. The Rams and 49ers, integral teams to all our fantasy success, or some great portion of fantasy success for people out there. So that'll be interesting. So yeah, there is still some issues to work through in regards to the free agency. And that kind of makes me think right now, we look at the running backs that are out there. Chris Carson's status uncertain going into this week. I will say, Pete Carroll, the eternally optimistic Pete Carroll, is is not sugarcoating this one. When Pete Carroll says I don't know, I think that means this guy's almost dead. Right? Mm-hmm. He's generally very optimistic. So Mike Davis looks like next guy in line. So let me say you're sitting there looking at your waiver wire, Justin. You're playing PPR. You're looking at Mike Davis. You're looking at Duke Johnson. You're looking at Elijah McGuire. Make a pick.
It's Duke Johnson. I mean, there's no question about it. This running back has led all running backs over the last 3 seasons in receptions. And we saw, in fact, I'll talk about Duke Johnson in a little bit, how he should be used. And I continue to say this on this podcast. Every team, I think, yearns to have a Duke Johnson. So in PPR formats, he's my guy. I can foresee him having 5, 6, 7 targets every single week from here on out. So it's Duke Johnson, and although I'm intrigued by McGuire, not a big enough sample size. It's a vanilla Jets team. I think there's more allure when you look at the Browns on paper. So it's Duke Johnson, and it's not even close. As far as Davis goes, we saw what he could do. It's discouraging because, again, you were at the draft and saw Rashad Penny get drafted as early as he did, and it's just we've seen nothing at this moment. So it's Duke Johnson.
It's interesting because I like to go back and look at what we were hearing before and who said it. And Dan Graziano from ESPN was the guy who told us that the plan was to play Chris Carson and let Rashad Penny sit for a year and soak up the offense and figure things out. Turns out he was right. None of us believed him at the time, and I mean nobody, except he believed himself. But maybe for a 1-week rental, I think Davis might be a reasonable play. But I think you're right going over the longer term. At wide receiver, Kyle, maybe there's a couple guys we're looking at that aren't associated with the Bengals. A guy that pops kind of to mind for me that was intriguing, and maybe it's a little, we're getting a little overboard on this, but Maurice Harris in Washington had a huge game, tons of targets. Now Paul Richardson's out, maybe Jamison Crowder goes back, but this would actually allow Harris to move to his natural position where Richardson was playing. Any interest in anybody in Washington with that offensive line now ravaged, and this includes Adrian Peterson. As things stand right now, how are you feeling about this offense in general? And is there anyone, I know Josh Doxson finally hit the end zone. Anyone here worth picking up?
I mean, I could see in deeper rosters taking a flyer on Maurice Harris, but overall, like you said, the offense wasn't electric before, and now they're losing offensive linemen left and right. It looks like they're on the downside, on the downward trend for this season. Deeper rosters, or if you're really in a pinch in terms of we've got Buymageddon going on. Stephon Diggs was injured. Now he's on bye week as well. Players, if you got, bad luck in terms of injuries and buys, I can see a flyer, but you can't start him this week, and it's unlikely he becomes an every week starter.
Justin, does Anthony Miller have a shelf life? Would that be related to Allen Robinson's return, or does he appear to be establishing a legitimate role in the Chicago Bears offense?
I think we were all optimistic about Miller, and I think that he's a top 3 or 4 wide receiver in this class. There's no two ways about it. If you saw what he did in college, he's a special talent. Mitch Trubisky has been in fantasy circles. He's looked terrible in real life, but in fantasy circles, he's been pretty good. So I like Miller. There's going to be bumps and bruises. We're talking about a rookie, but I think if there's a spot for him to flourish, I think it's the Chicago Bears.
I don't disagree with you there. I think that's pretty good. Just a quick look at the tight ends as well. Maybe guys that are out there, Jack Doyle, maybe Chris Herndon, a guy that I like a little bit, but he's kind of touchdown dependent. Caught the 4 targets this week. But Doyle is the guy. And here's a question I've been getting a lot on Twitter. Kyle, you can take this one. Jack Doyle or Eric Ebron? Is this as simple as PPR and standard, or is there more to it for you?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the very basic argument to say, well, one guy's this, one guy's that, because it's easy to do them. It's easy to make my brain work that way. And some guys, it is defined by that in some sense. But I don't know if it has to be exactly binary that way. I think they'll both be at least somewhat valuable when you look at the receiving core. I couldn't have named you most of the players outside of T.Y. Hilton, so they have to get their receptions, their targets have to go somewhere. And I think that can go to both of them. But I would say, I'd argue that Jack Doyle in PPR and standard, just because I think he'll garner a much higher target share, and that's the touchdown of the discrepancy in talent.
Yep. Ding, ding, ding. Opportunities are what we're chasing right now, people. And I've been saying this for the last couple of days, but Look at the guys that are getting the chances. These are the players you want to play. Jack Doyle's going to get tons of chances. And look, if you're quit playing names, start playing opportunities. And by that, I mean, if you're me, quit playing Rob Gronkowski. You're just playing his name. You're not getting any opportunities, right? And even when he's on the field. And I mean, that's the thing we're looking at here, the kind of situation. So quarterbacks, turns out, who knew? It was revealed to us at Levi's Stadium last Thursday that Nick Mullins is the best quarterback ever to play the game. How did this happen? And look, okay, so I'm going overboard, but we've got a game this week, and let's say you're a quarterback streamer and you're at the end of your wits, and you find yourself looking at the Monday night game. Nick Mullins, the newly minted starter for the San Francisco, at least again this week, versus Eli Manning. Justin,
there's a low spread in that game. The Niners are a 3-point favorite. Hey, why not? It's a position that we know what this league has become, and it is pass happy. We saw what happened with the 49ers last week. And look, I think you would be content if you're hard pressed to find a quarterback. I'm okay with that. And I think at some point or another, Eli Manning will show some fireworks, but I don't think it's going to be a shootout necessarily for the 49ers. But I think I'm okay with it. And look, you talk about opportunity in fantasy, and it's important, but in real life as well. I mean, this kid could find himself getting paid if he has this type of poise and moxie right off the bat. Or was it a measure of what the Raiders are tanking? I mean, they looked awful.
There awful. You go. Now we're getting somewhere. Look, it's interesting. I talked to George Kittle this week, the new Rob Gronkowski, by the way. And he talked about how this kid's always in the playbook. Look, everyone's always in the playbook, but he did come off the practice squad. I think you're trying to catch lightning in a bottle if you go back to that. Kyle, talk us all off the ledge and explain to us why Baker Mayfield is the better streaming play.
I mean, one, like you said, I think going after Nick Mullins of all people is the phrase "chasing points" comes to mind. We see last week's box score and you go, I'm sure this will happen again. But looking at Vegas, as Justin mentioned, low spread, but also just a low over under. It's probably going to be an ugly game. And in terms of long-term viability, a guy with the pedigree or lack thereof of Nick Mullins is really just something you don't typically want to target as opposed to Baker Mayfield. I think many thought, including myself, best quarterback coming out. He's certainly got better weapons from Njoku to Duke Johnson, Jarvis Landry, and Antonio Callaway's starting to look up a little bit now. Weapons, talent, he checks all the boxes relative to Nick Mullins.
Quick look at the Monday night game, the Dallas Cowboys. If you've been on the Twitter all day today, or we're talking on Tuesday, and if you haven't been on, go check out Brian Baldinger's timeline, where you'll see some clips of the Cowboys offensive linemen blocking each other. Look, they're a little bit of a mess right now, right, in terms of play calling. Amari Cooper, a mixed bag, a promising start, but a little bit of a mixed bag there. The other side of the ball, I thought, got interesting.
Yeah.
Do we believe that this was the Cowboys defense, no joke, right? So was this Marcus Mariota's coming out party, or is this a one-game spike, Justin Lonero? You will answer now.
Look, Marcus Mariota has that poise, and if you build a quarterback that's going to look like him, he made a couple throws last night that were big boy throws. If you look at the Dallas Cowboys defense, they attack the ball. They're a hard-working unit. Sean Lee was Sean Lee for the 3 minutes that we got to see him play. But it's really sad. He's the Jordan Reed of defensive players. But look, I don't know that the Titans have the quote-unquote weaponry around them. Derrick Henry is somewhat of a Brandon Jacobs to me. I like what we saw out of Dion Lewis. I think Corey Davis is going to be special in the future. But your boy, Delaney Walker, who you said was the most fit man you've ever seen in your life, is no longer there. He's that proverbial safety blanket for Marcus Mariota. Look, I think I'm not ruling the Cowboys out at all. In fact, I think that they could still make the playoffs. I like what I saw.
They play in the NFC East. I could make the playoffs in the NFC.
Yeah, but the addition of Amari Cooper, I think it can. Maybe there's going to be a coaching change eventually. I don't think it's going to happen in season, but I'm not going to rule the Dallas Cowboys out at this point in time. I am still cautiously optimistic about Marcus Mariota, and I think that if in hindsight, I think the Bucs would probably draft Marcus Mariota over Winston.
Interesting. So I don't want to get too deep in this because they're on the bye, but Baltimore, a lot of you mentioned the coaching hot seat. John Harbaugh, it's not going to go there, certainly not this week. But at some point, I mean, if let's say this offense doesn't improve, what would we expect if we saw Lamar Jackson at quarterback, Kyle?
I mean, I'm not sure. I know people said that maybe he wasn't ready to be the NFL passer that we wanted him to, but it's the Konami code. It's rushing, and he's arguably the best athletic quarterback we've seen in my lifetime. I'm only a spry young boy, but in my lifetime, there's a good argument that he is the most athletic quarterback we've seen, and that's rushing yards and that's rushing touchdowns, and that's a broken system for quarterback scoring. Look at the yardage. Most leagues are 25 passing yards for .10 rushing yards. If he's not the best passer, oh well. As long as he's rushing the ball, which we obviously know he can do, you can at least expect a weekly starter from him. And if he does turn out to be a good passer, you can expect, a really high-end weekly.
So here's my feeling on this. And look, this is what I've seen with the Baltimore offense. The opponents have taken away the deep ball. That was what was killing people early in the season. And it's, that's been exasperated by a lack of offensive tackles at this point and things like that. But if they go, Lamar Jackson to me is a guy that if I have room on my roster and he's laying around out there, I might want to grab him. He might be that kind of athletic quarterback as you head into your playoffs that just with the running ability alone could maybe be interesting to you and have if you're a guy that doesn't have like who, Justin, Patrick Mahomes, unless you have Patrick Mahomes, right?
He's definitely not Patrick Mahomes. But we've been talking about Lamar Jackson. The show started in May. I think we started in May, and we've been talking about Jackson. And look, they went out and they got some offense. They picked up Smokey Brown. You grab Michael Crabtree. Willie Snead is there. Alex Collins is going to have this enormous role. They need to win. They need to win now. But in terms of Lamar Jackson, look, he's talented. He's not Mike Vick, Kyle. Michael Vick is the fastest thing I've ever seen with my eyes in that regard. But look, sometimes you need a little modification, and I think that the three of us have talked about Jackson enough to know, if something doesn't happen, and I think if it doesn't happen quick with Joe Flacco and the Ravens, then we're going to see Lamar Jackson sooner than later. And it's week 10.
I would agree. It may be preceded by a move with the offensive coordinator there, maybe Marty Morningweg giving away to Greg Roman, but we'll see about that. So, all right, like I said, was not a big newsy week. Let's go ahead and jump into the daily fantasy festivities. I'm going to start with you, Kyle. The games that you like this week, your top game this week. What are the over-unders howling at?
I mean, every week we talk about it. The over-unders just keep rising. I'm seeing 50s all over the board right now, but one that I think won't be as quite highly owned is the Falcons-Browns game. I think the targets on the Browns are very clear in the sense that we saw the Duke Johnson emergence, and now he plays the Falcons, who are like the iconic funnel teams in terms of running back targets, and then the Falcons are amazing. So I think we could see predictably a lot of scoring in there.
Interesting. I was talking to D. Orlando Ledbetter of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution tonight. We're talking just about that offense in general. He dropped a couple interesting tidbits to me. One, they do expect to keep running the ball. I was surprised last week at what Tevin Coleman was able to do, and Ito Smith in general. But the question was, how do we divine the fortunes of Mohamed Sanu versus Calvin Ridley? How do we know who to play, say, if you're a daily player? And Dio's suggestion was if it's a zone defense, go with Mohamed Sanu. If it's man, go with Ridley. And so we play Cleveland this week, and ideally they want to play man, but they're down some guys. Might it switch to zone this week, or is that defense being beat up make it even more appealing to you, Justin?
Yeah, and in terms of dependability, I think Mohamed Sanu is one of the more underrated wide receivers in the game. He's a bigger body inside, easier for Matt Ryan, who's struggled at sometimes in the past, bigger target in Sanu. And look, Calvin Ridley has come back to life. These are the bumps and bruises out of rookie wide receivers, any position for that matter, because they're a rookie. So it's going to be Sanu. In a tournament, it would be certainly Calvin Ridley, but I think Mohamed Sanu, dollar for dollar, is one of the more dependable, underrated wide receivers in the game.
All right, what's your game this week, Justin?
I'm going to have to agree with Kyle in terms of the Falcons and the Cleveland Browns. I mean, we saw what Patrick Mahomes was able to do in Cleveland. I think that Matt Ryan can do something similar. The spread's 51. The Falcons are a favorite. I agree with you, Bob. And look, for Tevin Coleman, it's an audition this season. It's a contract year. He's a bigger body. He's going to get paid, and I think last week was kind of his coming out party. Obviously, it helps that Devontae Freeman is not there. I'm looking at the New Orleans Saints and Cincinnati Bengals game there. 55 is the over-under. The Saints are a favorite. There is no A.J. Green, but there's going to be some points. I don't think it's a big Joe Mixon week. The Saints have been plugging the run, but, you're going to like some Tyler Boyd. You're going to like Andy Dalton on the cheap, and you're certainly going to like pieces of that New Orleans Saints offense, starting with Alvin Kamara and definitely Michael Thomas and, of course, Breeze. And isn't Dez Bryant? Doesn't Dez Bryant have a tryout coming up?
He's working out for the Saints, and as is Brandon Marshall, Kamar Aiken. I'm wondering if I was watching Good Morning Football this morning, and Kay Adams, my old friend, made a good point when she said, look, if you're Dez Bryant, you can't get separation, but you're still a big body capable of imposing your will physically on smaller defenders in certain situations. Who better to throw you the football than one Drew Brees? It's an interesting concept. Looking at the quarterbacks this week, obviously Matt Ryan, Kyle is going to be on your list. Who else?
Another guy I'm looking at is Phillip Rivers. I mean, Oakland's got to be packed in, right? Like, do they care at all anymore? The way they're playing defense, it does not seem like it.
It appears not.
It would appear unlikely that they care about football anymore. Giving up the 5th most points to opposing passers. Phillip Rivers just 6K this week, and he's been incredibly efficient. And I think certainly you could expect to see some regression, but I also think it's just a product of Mike Williams is coming to his own. They've still got Keenan Allen. I think they just surround him with a lot of talent. Melvin Gordon's playing particularly well also. 10.1 average yards per, or adjusted yards per attempt, 7.7% touchdown rate. He's incredibly efficient going against a defense that's completely packed in here, and I like that.
I feel like if Keenan Allen was like a guy we hadn't seen before, we would all think he's one of the best guys, best newcomers in the league. And we're just a little let down as he's been playing pretty well. Justin, quarterbacks you might like at the lower end of the price scale.
If I'm going to pay, first of all, I do agree with Kyle and Phillip Rivers. I'm going to spend $6K. I'm not going to go at Ryan Fitzpatrick at home against Washington. I think Kyle's absolutely right. The talent is there. The backfield is established. And Phillip Rivers, even at his age, has been as steady as anyone. If I'm going down, gentlemen, I think going back to Marcus Mariota, we're getting a discount here. There's a chance that the Titans are going to be playing catch-up. Marcus Mariota had close to 25 DraftKings points last week against the Cowboys. Last night, he was 21 out of 29. 4,700 for Marcus Mariota. I'm going to like some Dion Lewis as well. I don't know that I think Corey Davis is sub 5K as well, but we know what Bill Belichick will do, and he'll probably take Corey Davis out of the equation. So there would be a case where you could play Marcus Mariota naked and probably get right around 20 DraftKings points. So I'm going there, and I certainly agree with Kyle as far as Phillip Rivers. He's steady, and you feel safe playing him every single week, especially against the Raiders. And that, by the way, that Raiders performance was one of the worst. It was embarrassing. I mean, there were moments in that game watching the Raiders, I felt bad for him. It was pathetic.
It is pretty pathetic, and the Bengals still say, hold our beer. Let's look at some running backs here. Kyle, start with you. High dollar guys. I mean, the obvious jumps to mind, right?
Yeah, Duke Johnson, definitely still looking at a guy like Todd Gurley. I know he had a subpar week last week. Still scored a touchdown, but fantasy fans won't be happy with him if he's not going to get them 30. And at his cost, I can see that. But I'll return to that well this week. But a guy I'm looking to get even more into is Kareem Hunt. The game script in this game could just be like unimaginably high lead for Kansas City early in the game against Arizona, who's another team that looks completely done with already. So you could just get Kareem Hunt running out the clock starting in the second quarter. That's a guy I'm absolutely going to get into. And they've also started picking up his passing game usage. The first few weeks really didn't get used much at all. Now he's averaging 5 targets per game over the last 4 games. He scored every week since week 1. That's the guy I'm really looking to pay up.
Yeah, Justin, you on the running backs?
How can you go wrong with Kareem Hunt? I mean, right up at the top, you're seeing the Cardinals are giving up 143 yards per game on the ground. Melvin Gordon on the road gets Oakland. I'm giggling because they're that pathetic. 144 yards in a game. So I'm going to build right around Melvin Gordon and Kareem Hunt. Of course, like I said about the Saints and Bengals, I'm going to want some Alvin Kamara in that lineup. Maybe you can. I mean, there is a fair amount of value at wide receiver where you could flex one of these 3, play all 3 of them. But in the mid range, I'll probably use some Adrian Peterson as well. Gentlemen, real quick, Adrian Peterson, he's the biggest superstar that nobody cares about at this point. Bob, I mean,
yeah, he's the biggest superstar now without an offensive line. Look, I've been a skeptic all along. And so I should, acknowledge that right up front. And he's been very impressive, and I've been pleasantly surprised at what he's done. But we've seen some of those games like we've seen in the past couple of years where he doesn't show up. This past week was one of those against the Falcons, who a pretty beat up defense, but also his offensive line. They lost both starting offensive guards. Trent Williams out for an extended period. I think the party might be over.
Wow.
I think the party might be over. I mean, I just, I don't think, look, there's offensive linemen don't grow on trees. You don't just go out the farm and pull a kid out of the barn. Oh, look at him throwing those bales of hay. He can do this. I mean, there's not like, I remember once I was talking to the former GM of the Broncos, Ted Sundquist, and he said, look, everyone's got a list of players you call up when you get in these situations. And he says, and the problem is on offensive line, those guys don't grow on trees. There just aren't a bunch of them out there. There's never a bunch available. So you'll be looking at other people's practice squads, etc. The Redskins have signed 3 players. We'll see what they can do. But ask the Arizona Cardinals how that works out. It's not the greatest route. So that's a problem for me. In addition to as one of the few people on earth older than Adrian Peterson, I think I can safely say that being old kind of wears you down a little bit. And so at some point it's gonna all catch up with him. The combination of things. Look, he's Superman. I get it. I'm not tugging on his cape. Everyone back down. It's not like that. It's just the reality is he's dealing with a beat up offensive line and he is an aging guy. And I wonder how long he can hold up the workload. Kyle, let's look at wide receivers for us. What do you got?
Looking at my cash lineups, we talked about him already, so I'll gloss over quickly. Tyler Boyd, the target's going to be his way against, one of the worst defenses in terms of points allowed to, I guess it would be best for DFS players, one of the best defenses in points allowed to opposing receivers. But moving on to tournaments, a guy I'm looking to pay up for is Tyreek Hill. I think he's had 2 down, I know he's had 2 down weeks, and the week before that was 20 points, which for a guy like Tyreek Hill, he's not going to win you any tournaments with that. So really 3 weeks that he hasn't completely crushed, and that's going to keep his ownership in check. It certainly won't be extremely low, but whenever you can get a guy with game-breaking speed like Tyreek Hill at anything other than a premium tournament ownership, you have to buy into that.
What about you, Justin?
I'm going to go right back to Julio Jones and Michael Thomas, and there's going to be points in both those games, and I'm comfortable playing both of those. You're talking about 2 of the top 3 wide receivers in the NFL. You're getting them a shade over 8K. I'm good with that. I mean, we talked about Tyler Boyd. You're paying a Tyler Boyd premium. We know A.J. Green's out now. So Boyd is, I think, whether he's in or out, he's still probably going to get close to 10 targets. I do like Keenan Allen at 7,100. Talk about dependable. It correlates with what Phillip Rivers does. Not the fastest guy in the world, but easily one of the best route runners. I'm fine with Keenan Allen at 7,100. When you look at Julian Edelman, he's healthy. Again, the nonverbal communication, you know what you're getting out of Julian Edelman. That's 10 targets back-to-back weeks. He doesn't have a knack for the end zone, but he's going to get you close to 20 DraftKings points. But so I'm fine with that. And again, I talk about a couple of cheap players. I mentioned Corey Davis real quick. They're going to be playing catch up. I'm fine with that. But let me throw one name at you, and that's going to be Adam Humphries at 3,900. I think Humphries led the Bucs last season in receptions. He might have had 70 or shade over 70, but he looked good last week. He looked good the week before. And at 3,900, we know what Adam Humphries is. Kind of underneath, there's a lot of weaponry in Tampa Bay. Give me a sub-K Adam Humphries in a game that's probably going to have some points in it.
Interesting. I think we should dive into the sea of mediocrity now. So put the ho-hos down, Justin. Get your swim trunks on, and tell me the tight ends that you're buying into this fine week.
Do I have to? Well, you mentioned Jack Doyle. Of course he gets the Jaguars. Look, Doyle, 80 receptions last year. Splitting hairs with Eric Ebron? I don't think so. Low A-dot player. Andrew Luck, well, his arm is better than we thought it was going to be, gentlemen. He's on pace for, I think Jamie Eisenberg of CBS Sports said he was going to have 40. He's on pace for 46 touchdowns. Andrew Luck, that is. But he's got, again, nonverbal communication. Jack Doyle, Andrew Luck has it. 4,300. I'm fine. People are going to be scared because he gets the Jaguars. It is on a fast track at home, so we certainly like that. And look, for the money, it's going to be Austin Hooper. Am I confident about it? A ton? No, but there is a rapport with Matt Ryan, 3,800. It's a position, gentlemen, where you're hard pressed. I mean, it was Herndon last week for me. He gets Buffalo this week, so 3,100, I guess. But outside of those players, I don't have a ton. And of course, if you want to spend $7K on Travis Kelce, you might get wide receiver production, but I can't see myself going towards O.J. Howard or maybe Jimmy Graham at 4,600. But for me, it's going to be Doyle, and Austin Hooper, and mainly because of their cost.
Interesting. What about you, Kyle?
Yeah, one of the guys that we talk about every week, and it's paid off a few times that I'll look to in tournaments, is David Njoku, just getting more exposure to this game in general. You know, the Atlanta defense is one that typically funnels to these low ADOT, higher completion rate type of plays, such as the running backs, but also the tight ends. And I think it's a way to sort of gain leverage on the Atlanta offense, because we know opposing offenses are typically correlated. That's how you get these high over-unders. And also the Atlanta defense is just continually in shambles, losing players every week. Haven't been healthy since week 1. So that's a way I'm going to buy into this game.
Interesting. Let's look at defenses real quick. I guess the Buffalo Bills are playing against the New York Jets. That's all. Whoever's going against Sam Darnold is going to be appealing. Also, whoever's going against the Bills is going to be appealing. Who we like in this one, guys?
I'm going back to the Chicago Bears. The Vikings got to Matt Stafford 10 times last week. I like the Bears at home. You're not paying $4K. You're paying $3,600. I am fine. They have as much talent on defense, I think, as just about anybody in the league. I like that unit. I'm not going to get cute this week. At this moment, again, we record on Tuesdays, so it's early and I'll have time to tinker, but I'm fine. I'm going to play the Chicago Bears at home, 3,600.
Anyone who's looked at your profile picture knows cute isn't part of this. Kyle, defenses.
Speaking.
What a giggle you have, Kyle.
Yeah. Show's completely derailed, guys. All right, so getting back on track, you mentioned it. Anyone who's going up against Buffalo, we saw they have so many beautiful ways to let the other team score points. I mean, it's so funny that of all of, this may have been one of Nathan Peterman's games, and it didn't even seem to be all that his fault. So many of the one of the pick sixes was close to a pass interference that was hit into the air. Not his fault that it got taken back. Another one was a fumble. Always play against Buffalo, but they'll be super chalky. If I'm looking to get off the chalk, Washington 3K. Tampa Bay is a stunningly successful, dysfunctional offense. If they get another imploding week from Ryan Fitzpatrick, which, as we've seen, he's prone to do, that's just an offense I'm looking to bet against, basically, by choosing this Washington 3K defense. And they also added Clinton Dix, an incredibly...
LOL Clinton Dix.
Yeah. Just quickly, and because I don't want to put a time, limitation on this. I know people will be listening after this. Thursday night game. Two potent offenses, high-scoring affairs. Who do you like in that game, you guys, both of you? Start with you, Justin.
I think I'm going to go with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, they have it all.
At home.
I like the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're a favorite at home, 7-point favorite. There's going to be some points in that game, but it's going to be a beautiful one. We'll get to see James Conner. The whole world will get to see him. Give me the Steelers at home. I think the Carolina Panthers are one of these teams where there's not a ton of buzz, but they are one of the best teams in the NFC. So Pittsburgh Steelers at home. I don't know that they'll cover. 7's kind of fishy to me, but it's certainly going to be a good one to watch.
Carolina Panthers averaging 27.5 points a game under Norv Turner. They're looking pretty good. They're like 72.4% red zone touchdowns. It turns out this Norv Turner fellow does know a little offense, and he has some pretty good players in Cam Newton. Kyle, what do you think about these under the radar? They're remaining under the radar because only one of them shows up at a time. DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, either of them viable plays for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you look at the DraftKings showdown slates. DJ Moore disappointed last week, and he was a guy people were on because he had a good week the week before, and it seemed as things were trending up. He got 2 targets in the game. He turned one of them into a catch. It wasn't a great game for him, but it's hard when they got up so early, and it was just a weird game in terms of game script for them. So he's a guy I'd look to, especially if you're playing the super high ownership showdown slates. You're going to have to look to make some different moves. And I think Curtis Samuel might see a bump in ownership just because of the good week he had last week, scoring 2 times, 2 different ways. I'll pivot from him to DJ Moore because you're going to want to make salary to get guys like Antonio Brown or Juju or even James Conner.
That's the way. I like it. All right, guys, let's wrap it up.
Go ahead, Kyle. Wrap. And by the way, your Curtis Samuel take is because he's a Buck guy, isn't it? People were kind of off him. I like Curtis Samuel. I do like Curtis Samuel, and I do like Moore. I like what the Carolina Panthers are doing. I can be found on Twitter at Justin Lonero, Kyle Dvorchak at FF Kyle the Kid, of course, Bob Harris at Football Diehard. This podcast is sponsored by DraftKings. They're the leader in one-week fantasy sports. So if your season-long teams are tanking, which a lot of teams are, you go to DraftKings, sign up using our promo code Bob likes to be bothered on Twitter. So does Kyle. And I don't mind fielding questions, permitting the time and date. Come check us out.
That'll bring us to a close. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.